How was everyone's lunch? Okay. I got my wish, which was to eat Vietnamese food in the Bay Area. Yeah. Mexico, I wouldn't say Vietnamese food is widely available there. I'm guessing in Mexico City, but probably not outside of Mexico. We do have a Korean restaurant, actually two in my town. A lot of sushi, but no Vietnamese. Um, Wonderful. How about on Zoom? You guys are doing good? Roxy, I thought a little bit more about your question. You know, and this might be helpful for everyone. As I'm looking over there because I can see you. The camera's here, but the screen's here. Um, and this might be interesting for everyone. So generally, I haven't actually received a teaching on this particular song, but I would like to now, um, because you know what we could probably say is this particular song from Milarepa. This is more of a would be in the tantric or Vajrayana lineages of Buddhism, meaning there's a lot of coded language being used, and also, um, like we'll see tomorrow when we get a little bit into this song in a different way, more on the Vipassana side. It's a Mahamudra teaching, which generally Mahamudra, as we're exploring a little bit this weekend, more it enters in the tantric business of Buddhism, or what we call Vajrayana Buddhism, right? Tantra here, not meaning any for those of you newer to Buddhism. It's not a weird sex cult we're talking about. We're talking about the meaning of the word tantra, which is to thread, or a continuity is what it really translates as. So, anyways, a large part of Tibetan Buddhism is Tantric Buddhism or Vajrayana Buddhism. So Mahamudra exists more in that realm, though we have a way of also working with Mahamudra through understanding it through some of the sutras, like the Heart Sutra we recited and things like that. So that's more the take I'm bringing here, because if you really want to go deep in Mahamudra, you need a guru, and then from there there's communication that happens that's nonverbal through what we call transmission, right? Nothing weird, but something quite amazing and beautiful when it's a qualified, you know, teacher who actually has realization. So I don't want to deprive you of that experience. So I'm not going into the tantric elements of this, because first you need that introduction. That's really important. Otherwise, the words will actually become like uh like taking pure clean water, shoving it in your freezer, and it becomes frozen, and then it doesn't affect you that much. So in Vajrayana, it's really important we have freshness and, how do you say it, warmth coming through lineage and transmission, which is mostly nonverbal. Some of it's verbal. Anyways, so this song kind of sits in that. So to really go deep into this, um, there's some, like I said, coded language here. For instance, like take the sun and moon as your example. The sun and moon often refers to wisdom and compassion, right? So that's another way we could interpret this, where the sky is like the mind. We're connecting to that sky-like mind, which has no center or edge, and from there, we can actually behold or experience our innate wisdom and compassion. You see, Roxy, how like there's many ways to interpret this here. And then, like I said, without center or edge, this refers to non-duality, which we're not getting into today. Tomorrow we'll talk about it a little bit more from more of a sutra perspective. Um, but this kind of thing, it's like, in the tantric traditions of Mahamudra, this would be considered a pointing out instruction, meaning when Milarepa is there in person giving these instructions to his student, this woman, it's not just the words. There's an energy being transferred from Milarepa's realization. And we can get that too, but we have to meet those kinds of teachers, which is definitely not me. So I'm just being clear, making a distinction here, right? So yeah. So I hope that helps, just to give some more context, right? Yeah. So, and we'll get more into this afternoon. But did anything come up over lunch? Any more questions or doubts or complaints or? Oh yeah, that's right. Eyes. About the eyes? Yeah, maybe we'll. Yeah, maybe we'll. Let's see if there's anything else, and then we'll go to that.
I wanted to ask this notion of hosting versus subject object.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused there.
In which relationship, like?
Well, to be a host to me suggests some kind of separation.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Everybody got that? What she's asking? Remember, I kept saying in the guided meditation, become the host of awareness, right? Which in a way, I just wanted to describe a little bit more around that because now we're going to get into like a little bit more of the meditation teachings. In shamatha practice, or meditative awareness, which is really the first mode of what we're training in. And there's many different kinds of shamatha. So some of you are familiar with like watch the breath, or some people, be aware of the body, things like that. So shamatha, there's many techniques, but the view of shamatha is there to connect with the clear nature of mind, its natural kind of clarity, to develop awareness, and then a stability of stillness, essentially, right? We call it also calm abiding, so probably you're familiar. So the kind of shamatha that we're exploring this weekend is coming from the Mahamudra traditions, right? That's what I chose. And we'll see in the text, we'll read some verses from the Panchen Lama's text, the other text in a few moments, and we'll get a deeper picture of what that might look like. But it's a little bit different than focusing your breath focusing your attention in a narrow way on something like the breath or something like that. There's more a quality of openness and rest that we're cultivating, that then focus or presence or concentration can develop out of that awareness. So I'm not answering your question, just a preamble. And so in shamatha, we're working with a dualistic experience. So we're working with a subject-object experience. It's only in Vipassana that we start to try to antagonize that relationship of subject-object. So we could kind of read Milarepa's instructions here in two different ways. We could read them as a shamatha teaching, and then we're going to see, like, when we read a little bit later, his student comes back to him with her experience. She presents her meditation experience, and she had quite good meditation experience. And so then Milarepa introduces Vipassana. That's how I'm reading this text. He kind of is introducing both, actually, through these verses. So we can read it differently. So what I mean by that is he's kind of introducing going beyond subject and object, right? Because that's where we have without center or edge, without increase or decrease, without shifting or change, without surface or base. Those are all pointing to beyond subject and object. But first, as a preliminary, we're working with shamatha, which has a subject-object, right? Subject being essentially the mind or awareness, and the object could be the breath or the clarity nature of mind or whatever, right? Visualization. Yeah, makes sense. So it's really a distinction between shamatha and vipassana. And I know some of you who are newer, maybe I'm going, I'm really too many terms, but basically, I'll say a little bit more to make it more clear. So we define meditation or gom, the view of gom, as familiarizing the mind with something virtuous, right? That would be the view. But when it comes to the techniques of meditation, we have two baskets, two categories. Like I said, shamatha, or any practice that settles the mind or stabilizes awareness, and then vipassana, any practice that and actually, yeah, I'm using the word practice here, and I'll say why. Any practice that helps us to gain insight into the nature of things, right? That's how I define vipassana, because vipassana, if we're to define it more strictly, we would say, well, what nature of things? The impermanent nature of things, how we could say, where suffering comes from, nature of things, like its root, and then its non-dualistic nature, right? Or we sometimes say emptiness. though that word can be confusing. That's why I'm opening it up. So if we're to say, what does Vipassana do? It's helping us through meditation, through certain techniques or practices to gain insight into these three. Basically, to say it's opposites, our habit of permanence, our habit of, how do you say it, clinging, and then our habit of seeing things to be truly existent when they actually exist interdependently rather than independently. And I'm using some jargon, but we'll go deeper. So basically, to put it simply, helps us to see what's true and what's not true, right? So in these two baskets of shamatha and vipassana, or meditative awareness and insight meditation, you have lots of techniques. There's not just one or two. Sometimes people get confused because the word vipassana or vipassana in Pali, people know of a retreat, like a 10-day retreat where you can go and you can, be a hero and meditate for 15 hours a day. I mean, it's really amazing, actually. But it's very popular because people like the challenge of it, and also you can go very deep, very fast. And it's coming more from a technique in the Theravada where you note and you use a blend of concentration practice, and then Vipassana where you note thought. You do body scans, you note when things are happening. So that doesn't mean that is Vipassana. That means that's a certain technique of Vipassana. And then we have hundreds of other techniques of Vipassana throughout the Buddhisms, right? So Buddhism is not singular, it's plural, because it's multiple lineages and different traditions that spread based on the Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings all around the world. And now we have, Western Buddhisms. I think we're still struggling with this, but eventually we will. Anyway, some people think we do. I have doubt. I think we're baking, you know what I mean? But eventually we'll have authentic lineage here, I hope. Anyways, so that's what I want to be clear about. The purpose of shamatha, whatever the technique, is to settle the mind, settle this monkey mind, right? That wants to jump all over and, that's out of control. So that's like the preliminary. If we don't do that, we can't do the Vipassana, because Vipassana is going to be too difficult. Because with Vipassana, we need some ability to rest the mind so we can see into how things are. It's another way to think of it. And there's many techniques of Vipassana. I also want to say this. Vipassana isn't just meditation. It can be a lot of things. How do you say it? They all involve some element of awareness. So that's why it's so important we train in awareness in the shamatha techniques, through different shamatha techniques. But anything that helps us to see more clearly into how things are, and eventually, as your question is, to start to antagonize and pull apart our rigid habits of subject-object functioning, because when we really, it's another way to talk about Buddha or Sangye. That first part, the song that I talked about earlier, where we're clarifying, we're purifying. What are we purifying? The untruth that there is a separate object and subject. From a Buddhist perspective, that's a misperception. That's not a truth. And so when we remove that, we purify or we clarify what reality is. So part of awakening is removing that subject-object experience. So it's another way we also talk about non-duality, because what do we mean by duality? That we split into subject-object, right? And so in the meditation traditions, like in the Mahamudra traditions, we talk in this way because the language becomes less it's still a little bit philosophical, but it's more aimed at experience, right? So looking at our experience of subject means like who we think we are. Like when we think of self or me or mine or I, what is that? We don't usually question that, but we act from something like that. You see what I'm saying? Like I really was bugging Bay. Bay, I need some more coffee. I was up at 4:30. Please, anything but Starbucks, And then I didn't have the merit for what I call hipster coffee. And so we ended up at Starbucks. but I had the merit for something, So, anyways, oh shoot. I always get like think politics are gonna get me in trouble, but it ends up being coffee. Actually, this is kind of I can't. I'm, I'll do a cold brew. Like that's like my go-to that works at Starbucks because nobody can screw that up. You just put it. You just put some ice in coffee and it's there. Sorry, no, I'm going on a tangent. So what were we talking about? Help me to get back to what we were saying before coffee. Subject object, but also we were talking about is anybody like when that's getting removed. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. So you get what I'm saying with subject. But what is that? We have to question that. Through Mahamudra, we question that a little bit. We're going to do that tomorrow. Little bit. Don't worry. I'm not going to take you on a psychedelic trip unless you want to. We have some in the kitchen. um so yeah, so that's like one side. We have to question the subject, but then the object is everything else. Like think of what becomes objective to you, right? Again, this is the kind of world when we become when we're aspiring to become an inner being or a meditator, this is the kind of work we do. Sure, we need to learn some philosophy, but we apply the philosophy like this to become to like make our mind flexible so we can start looking in different directions. But what we learn to do through the shamatha and vipassana is to look with awareness, not to just look with the thinking mind. Buddhist philosophy, usually we work with the refinement of the thinking mind. Like this is all the beautiful teachings coming from Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, Vasubandhu, like all these great scholar saints of what we call the Nalanda tradition, when Nalanda monastery existed in India. And, in Tibetan Buddhism, they worship these kinds of figures. And that we use our thinking mind. We use our rational, analytical thinking mind to pull apart subject and object. And then in the Mahamudra tradition, we don't do that so much. We use awareness to look at the mind and to look at experience, to look at the subject who's perceiving, to look at the object, my cold brew, perception, right? So that's we have to become kind of passionate about that because otherwise it's very difficult to uncover the Buddha nature because we're obscured in this subject object kind of dance relationship, which is a toxic relationship. This is one of the, how samsara happens, how suffering happens. See, because I end up in a too much judgment about my coffee. It's like trapping myself. What? Oh, I love this actually. I'm just having fun. This one? Oh, I mean, I just make my own. Oh, I just usually do like a Italian press at home. But yeah, if I'm out, cappuccino, things like that. But I just this little Italian press from Colombia. I love it. With Mexican coffee, I grind it myself. Cheap and the best. Anyone else just before we kind of go more into the meditation? Sorry, we too deep in? Are you all okay? We went to this is kind of important. Also, sometimes it's important, like, I don't know how much you all are tracking. Sometimes it's important to like not know. Like we're like, interesting, but what? That's important. Especially when we really are earnest or heartfelt about waking up. If we have some interest in that, it's kind of important to I call it sometimes like breaking the mind. But what I mean by that is like breaking our habit of the need to know everything. Instead, we learn to sit with questions. Mahamudra is very beautiful for this because if we skip to conclusion too quickly with the kind of meditation Milarepa is talking about here, we'll lose it. It won't go in the right direction. You know what I mean by conclusion? We're like, I want to know what's beyond subject and object. I want to know what emptiness is. I want to know what this is. Well, yeah, we have to sit with it. Yeah. It's a bit annoying, but what else are we going to do? You know? Okay. So before we get into Bay's question, let's look at what the Panchen Lama has to say. Okay, so I'm in the text, the Galug Mahamudra text on page 2, just where we left off after Guru Yoga. So next, the Panchen Lama is going to talk about more or less how to meditate on Shamatha Mahamudra, what we're focusing on today, and then here, like, how to recognize the conventional nature of mind. So this is kind of an interesting way to look at it. Again, I feel like I've already gone into the weeds too much, so I want to be careful how much I go in the weeds. But let's see if you have some questions on what that is later. So he says, I'll just start from the paragraph there. In that state, where you're indistinct from your guru, and one little reminder here, guru doesn't just mean person, right? Normally, when we think of guru, we think of a person, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people these days think of, like, you know, some wacky guy with 100 Rolls Royces, but that's not what it means at all, you know, in the Buddhist tradition. Guru, the translation in Tibetan is Lama. I just have to explain this because otherwise we might get some doubts, right? Some confusion. The translation of Guru is Lama, and the way we usually define it is something that's weighty or heavy with spiritual realization, or we could say something that's weighty or heavy with this, how do you say, blossoming of Buddha nature. Remember, we talked about this. So basically, something that's awake, something that's beyond subject object, something that's beyond confusion, something that's beyond suffering, right? Something like that. And so guru, whenever we read this word or the word lama, even though it can mean different things in different contexts, in this context, that's what it's pointing to. And the physical teacher, like who we receive transmission from of these kinds of things, is part of that principle, but also our own nature of mind, like our own Buddha nature, also the lineage of women and men who have attained realization. Also, I don't know how to put it. This sounds really weird, but like this is also part of guru, if you know how to look. So we call this the guru of all phenomena, right? I'm not saying like this beater itself, but the nature of this beater is also part of guru. You see what I'm saying? The nature of this paper, the nature of the space in the room, the wall, your glasses, they're all part of the guru of all phenomena, meaning the nature of all phenomena. That everything, when we really unpack it, we find what's unfindable. We find this interdependent nature. We'll talk about that more tomorrow, right? So that's called the guru of phenomena. So there's some really interesting things here because all of this is pointing at back to what we started with, which is that this awakened nature pervades everything in a sense. It's not just our mind. It's like, it's just the difference is our mind can realize it. This can't realize its Buddha nature because it doesn't have a mind, right? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it doesn't have a mind. Let me put it that way. But when we use the word guru, it's like something weighty with this, with how things are, something like that that has the marks of not being confused, of being awake. Are we communicating at all? This is hard, so don't worry if it's like sort of confusing. It should be confusing actually, but we need to have some communication. Yeah. We're communicating 5%, 10%, something like that. That's enough for me, actually, as long as you're okay with that. So, and my main point is this. If we get stuck on like guru only being a person, we miss the purpose of the physical guru. The purpose of the physical guru is to introduce us to our mind, because they're another human being who eats, who, you know, has a human body, who goes through human experiences, but they also have become like an astronaut of their mind. They've become an explorer of their mind and have, to a certain degree, realized its nature. And it's like they become like a cell tower that can transmit that energy. That's all it is, you know? Because sometimes we get very caught up in like, I don't know how to put it, unhealthy relationships to this kind of thing, teacher-student things. In actuality, it's just someone who's done the work, and they, part of that work, the fruition of that work is they want to share that with us. Their heart is open. And so their life becomes about that. And if we're open enough, we can kind of tune into their energy, and we can experience some of that. Not because they're giving it to us, sort of like it turns our cell tower on. You see what I'm saying? We have a cell tower. That's our Buddha nature. But we need someone else's cell tower to kind of like, it's another way to help this old man recognize he has treasure under his house. You see what I'm saying? It's another way to do it. This is tantric business. But I'm just sort of giving some ideas, because the reason is because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And sometimes people get confused. And instead, you know, how do you say it? We have to talk a little bit about this and the meaning and all of that. And then hopefully there can be less confusion. But anyways, so it says here, in that state where you're indistinct from your guru, that, everything I just said, that makes sense? Do not allow your conceptual mind to entertain any fears of expectations, and enter equipoise without the slightest distraction. It's not the cessation of mental activity as when you faint or fall asleep. And then it says, begin keeping watch with undistracted mindfulness, and with alertness, make your mind attentive to any movement. This is kind of like another thing. The first one is more related to Vipassana, actually, but now he's going into Shamatha. Begin keeping watch with undistracted mindfulness, and with alertness, make your mind attentive to any movement. Tighten by making taut, and look nakedly at the nature of that which is clear and knowing. Recognize any conceptual thoughts that arise. Moreover, like a swordsman in a duel, exert yourself in cutting off whatever conceptual thoughts arise. Having finished cutting them off, rest your mind, and without losing mindfulness, loosen by relaxing. As it is said, tighten by making taut, loosen by relaxing, and there is where you place the mind. And when mind bound and entangled is relaxed, without doubt it frees itself. Please remember this verse. That verse is very important. In accordance with these statements, relax without becoming distracted. As you look at the nature of whatever conceptual thoughts arise, they disappear on their own, and a vacuity dawns. Similarly, if you investigate when the mind is still, a non-obstructing and empty clarity is vivid. It's called seeing that stillness and movement are integrated. Let's stop there. That's kind of going a little bit into another aspect of it. But up to there, yeah? So this is like our practice instruction, right? We sit. We'll talk about posture in a moment. We keep watch with undistracted mindfulness. This is an important term. So some of you have had shamatha teachings before, right? Like classical ones, mindfulness or some other version. This is Mahamudra now, so it's a little bit unique, right? So we have these terms like undistracted mindfulness, right? And with alertness, make your mind attentive to any movement. So basically, with mind, we look at mind, or we become aware of mind. That's what we're doing here. Tighten by making taut, and look nakedly at the nature of that which is clear and knowing. So remember, we started today, I was defining the conventional mind as clear and knowing. So I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, because this is an experience that needs to develop in meditation. So I don't want you to think too much about it. But essentially, we need to eventually make contact with that quality of mind, and that quality of mind is just it's there. It's not like something you need to find. Like you're experiencing that right now. It's just an aspect of the mind, like thinking. It's just that unfortunately it's like our spotlight is more attuned to thinking, so the clarity aspect is obscured. You know what I mean by that? It's covered, but it's there. So, and here we're not talking about the nature of mind so much or its emptiness or anything like that. We're just talking about relative reality, and we're talking about mind. So maybe this is a good point to do a brief definition of the aspects of mind. So Buddhism goes into a lot of content on what mind is, its mental states, all of that. Sonny Rinpoche, one of my teachers, he kind of simplifies it for meditators that I think is very useful. So that's what I'm going to describe now. So essentially, with the mind, it has these aspects of thinking, right, which we all know pretty well, right? Knowing, which I'll describe in a moment, awareness, and clarity. That's what we're talking about, clarity now, right? He is the text. So thinking, like I said, we all know that, right? We're caught in that most of the day. It's unfortunately, it's involuntary, meaning, this is what our first step is as a meditator to get a little bit more flexibility with thinking, where we're not drawn in by it so much. But that doesn't mean thought. Remember, I made a distinction in the guided meditation. Thoughts are not a problem in meditation. This is a big confusion with people. People think they have to block thoughts completely. This is a waste of time. One teacher, Nusho Ken Rinpoche, he said this is like trying to stop a waterfall. It's like pointless. So there's no need to try to stop thoughts. But what we simply do is we recognize thinking. And by recognizing thinking in meditation, we connect with the quality of awareness, which is a sense of watchfulness. Maybe we could say like the quality of mind that can observe, right? There's like a quality of like meta awareness where we can bear witness to something with the mind. And then you have knowing, which is natural. And so knowing is not thinking, but it's just like when you walk into the room and you see a flower. You don't have to think flower, right? You just know it's a flower. So that's a lot of the time that's what our mind is doing, unless it's entering discursive thought. It's basically just knowing things, right? Awareness is like a double knowing. That's another way to think of it. Because there's knowing, raw knowing, and then we can watch that we're knowing, or we can become aware we're knowing. So awareness is a quality also that we're all born with. It's a part of our mind. It's just something we don't train in. It's not something we train or, how do you say it, put energy into. And so we need to strengthen it. So that's why shamatha practice is so important, because we strengthen the awareness. Otherwise, it's like a muscle where we haven't done any reps. It remains kind of weak and unavailable. So that's mainly what we're doing in shamatha. But all of these things, awareness, knowing, and thinking, they come out of the clarity aspect of mind. And this clarity aspect, there's a lot of ways to talk about it, but basically, it's sort of like a light being turned on, right? And the light of mind is on 24/7, whether we're awake, whether we're asleep, whether we're alive or dead, whether we're in this body or not. From a Buddhist perspective, that light is on. And I guess we could say that's like, at least the level we're experiencing it, that's like our sentience, kind of, you know? But it's a very difficult thing to describe because it's just there and it's available, but it's not the thinking, it's not the awareness, it's not the knowing, but all of those are possible because of it. So it's the basis for all of perception and mind itself. And so in shamatha, Mahamudra shamatha, we actually learn to connect with that. But actually, all we need to do to connect with that is to just let the water still. You see what I'm saying? Or I was saying during the meditation, like a snow globe. Hey, this is a good example because, got my coffee here. Basically, no offense, I'm mostly talking about myself. This is what our mind is doing all day long, right? I mean, probably it's worse, but I'm just because I don't want my coffee to go everywhere, I'm going to keep it to this. Right? You can relate to this, no? And maybe at night we kind of put it down, but then our dream discursiveness kind of, now I'm spilling it. Our dream discursiveness kind of comes up. So anyways, so actually what we're doing when we meditate in this style is we're actually more relaxing. Like I said, we're more not doing than doing. We're letting the mind be. And what does that look like on an experiential level? It looks like this. Just putting the coffee down. Right? That's all we're doing when we're meditating. Now, whether you become relaxed or not or whatever, actually this doesn't care so much. The relaxation is like a natural side effect. It's not that interesting. But when this is still, we have the natural illusion or side effect of relaxation. And then the point is, because of that stillness, it's like we can recognize that the mind can perceive. We can recognize that the mind is on, like a light, right? And we rest there. And that's how we practice shamatha without support. Right? So it's kind of I like to think of this more as like, because a lot of people are used to practicing shamatha by focusing or concentrating. In this, you kind of sit back and rest, but you rest with awareness. That's the challenge, because we still need to strengthen that muscle. But we let it be rather than try to become something. Okay? That's why I tell you, I couldn't meditate for a lot of years until I met this kind of teaching. And then it was so much easier to just relax and just with mind. For many years, I struggled with the breath, like trying to focus on the breath. And I'm in kind of an anxious person, probably you noticed. I'm like an anxious person by nature. And so I would get really worked up and really tight and then like really exhausted when I try to meditate. Can any of you relate? And when I met this kind of teaching from a few teachers, um, I was like, okay, maybe I just try to rest with mind or rest with awareness. And it was like magic. It was like suddenly I could meditate. Not very well, but I could do it. And then I thought, this is so much easier than trying to force myself to focus or concentrate. And actually, over time, concentration comes out of this kind of practice. But it's a different approach. It's a little bit of a different approach. That's why I'm not saying this is it. This is just one style that might benefit you. And of course, there's lots of different styles of shamatha, some more concentration based. Anyways, so that's what's happening. Tighten by making taut. Here, this verse is a little confusing. It just basically means, as the Buddha said, when you're tightening, I think he was talking about a veena, an Indian instrument. I think that's what it was. Veena is the stringed instrument, no? So he was saying, just like you wouldn't tighten the string so tight or leave it so loose because you won't get the right sound. That's how we have to work with our mindfulness and meditation. Don't make it too tight and don't make it too loose. So essentially, that's what this is saying here. Tighten by making taut and look nakedly at the nature of that which is clear and knowing. Right? So we're looking without pretense or goal at the mind itself, and we're resting there, just like this, where we finally just leave this down. And then recognize any conceptual thoughts that arise. Moreover, this is another style. This is some particular instruction here that you would kind of, as you recognize thinking, that discursive thinking mode that we're all in, as soon as you become aware with that, as soon as you become aware of that, it sort of drops it. You don't have to do much, right? You just notice and you're back in awareness. That's another way to think of this verse. That's kind of more how I recommend. Then it continues, having finished cutting them off, rest your mind, right? So basically, the practice, as I keep saying, is to rest the mind in nowness. Sometimes we say clear, undistracted nowness. And then when discursive thought interrupts that, we notice it, we allow that to rest, and then we continue to rest. Eventually, this goes into like movement being okay as well, but we're not there yet. We're just talking about stillness. Yeah.
Um,
I'm laughing because it has to come through practice.
So I'm trying to do this. I'm meditating and I'm trying to just be aware of my thinking. And suddenly an oatmeal cookie pops into my head. So I say, oh, there's an oatmeal cookie. And that's what I do.
I mean, you can do that. I mean,
But is that what you're talking about here?
I'm kind of not being so clear there because there's many things you can do in that circumstance. There's many things. What I recommend, if you're asking me what I recommend,
Yeah.
let it be.
So let it be. Oh yeah, there's an oatmeal cookie.
I wouldn't even note it personally.
Wouldn't even note it.
No,
So note it as don't say to myself, there's an oatmeal cookie.
I would try to, if you can, don't do
Yeah,
that. Yeah. I mean, mostly we do that, so it's okay. I mean, you're going to do it. But what happens is as we strengthen this aware quality of mind that I mentioned, right? It's sort of like, yeah, that's why I kept using the word host. Like, I don't know. Have you ever been in a party where you just noticed, man, this host is really good. Like, they arrange the room really nice for their guests. It's like you can tell they really respect their guests. They're attentive enough to the guests, like when the guest has a need or needs their drink refill, but they're not like anxious, and dropping things and like making a mess. But they also kind of relax when there's nothing to do. So I'm using this as an analogy. Sometimes we have to reflect on kind of just worldly things and we can apply them. So I think about that in the sense of like, how do I want to train my awareness? Do I want to be so obsessed with every thought that comes that I like, how do you say it? Like I'm policing my thoughts? Not really. I've done that before. It's really exhausting in meditation. Do I want to be like a lazy host that doesn't care at all and just like let the guests like ransack my kitchen and whatever, throw a kegger in my house? No, I don't want to do that either. So I need to be attentive. But it's like awareness grows this capacity where more and more we leave things alone, but awareness knows it's happening. That's why I said we're mainly training and letting it be, right? But of course, shamatha has a view. So it's letting it be while we're maintaining clear, undistracted nowness. Clear just means the mind we're connected to that essence of mind that's awake, that's a light. And we're sustaining a recognition of that without distraction, because as long as we're aware, we're not distracted. It doesn't matter how many thoughts you have. If you're aware, you're not distracted. That's one thing to keep aware here. And then there's a sense of nowness, right? And we're just sustaining that. And then when thoughts come, sorry, it's not really thoughts that are the problem, it's thinking. So there's a distinction we have to make in our meditation. So there's a difference between thinking and thought. Thinking is the process of proliferating thought, one thought into a next and a next and a next, right? That's called distraction. We need to re-recognize awareness there. But then there's also just a thought arising. There's no problem with that. If you're aware of it, you're being a good host, just let the guests enjoy. Who cares? They're not doing anything to hurt you. So we have to make a distinction, what harms the meditation and what doesn't. Otherwise, we're going to be one of these hosts that polices everybody. No, don't touch that. Here's a coaster, Super annoying, this kind of host, no?
Recently, I was talking to my teacher last week about this because I was getting so much anger in from a person that I was distracted by. And she said, invite the anger in as a guest.
Sure.
And that resonates with me because it's routine. It's my routine.
Yeah.
It is my mind. And she said, just invite it in and let it sit. And that, even in just the last 5 days, has been so helpful.
Great.
It's like the power is gone and they're just there, it's just there. And it just kind of sits there quietly now rather than fighting it back. So I found that very helpful.
Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, this is the practice, because we can start to apply letting be to lots of things. and it really helps.
Uh, so just going a little bit, just to make sure that I understand. For me, what has been helpful is being aware that sometimes it's like I try to control the sky,
Yeah.
like no clouds, all shiny, or the opposite. Like I don't want the cloud to go away. I want the darkness. And just now in the previous meditation, just sitting and allowing whatever comes.
Yeah.
But I without doing anything.
Yeah, and the distinction here is like we need to become familiar enough with awareness that we know that we are aware or not. And that's, I mean, it's difficult when we're not aware. We're not aware of that. That's the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
But you see what I'm saying? Yeah.
It's like being aware of the awareness.
Kind of. Yeah. It's like just at least because if we're able to maintain awareness of clarity, like he's suggesting here, actually a thought can't harm your meditation. It can't at all. So then, like you said, we're just allowing. So I like this approach more, and then we'll do when I guide a meditation in a moment. We're also going to do some embodiment techniques because this is a whole nother side of things I like to teach. It's just it's not really the topic this weekend, so I'm not doing it. But a lot of the problems we have in our meditation can be mitigated through learning to allow in the body first, and then it actually become meaning that in the feeling world, then it becomes easier to allow in the mind. But yeah, you got the general view or what we're working with. It's just then the practice it's challenging. I mean, this is the challenge because it seems simple because it's like, oh, just leave everything alone, let it be. How do you say it? Like, don't do anything, but it's really hard. You know?
Yeah, it's like what you say. That reminds me what you say at the beginning. For me, it's very easy the listening or reflecting, but the not doing the meditation part. That's the most challenging because it's allowing, it's not doing, and that's the challenge for me.
Yeah, for all of us, and sometimes we need to exhaust the doing. So, I mean, there's lots of also really beneficial doing practices. I want to be careful here, especially for some of you who are newer. It's not that doing is bad. Like a lot of the meditations you'll see in many of these books on the shelf, and like if we were doing a different topic, like some analytical meditation topic or something, those are wonderful and they're very helpful. So in those we kind of do, but I find this practice very complementary because if we know how to rest the mind, we also know how to do those kinds of analytical meditations in a more skillful way. We know how to do it in a restful way where there's more space for things, because analytical meditation is meant to produce insight. So then there's a way for insight to come from space rather than squeezing two things together, you know? Yeah.
But that, to me, that now it's like a doing meditation.
With analytical meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that has its place, I'm saying. Yeah.
Yes, but then for me, it's like, again, I'm in the doing all the time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
When the challenge for me, it's like the not doing part.
Yeah, this is the kind of, how do you say it? The modern meditator's predicament, like when we come to Tibetan Buddhism, because Tibetan Buddhism often starts with analytical meditation. What I'm teaching here is usually more advanced. Like you would do a lot of other things first, and then maybe you'd be given this kind of teaching. But it's almost like, and some lamas also recommend that we do this first because of our modern proclivity we're already using our analytical mind way too much. So we actually have to know how to create space first. And then when we do analytical meditation, we'll have the room for that. I don't know. I don't have like a super strong opinion on that because I've seen the benefits of going both ways. But yeah, I do feel if there's no space and we just keep filling it, we're going to get exhausted with meditation. Yeah. Yeah.
Just wanted to share. 2 days ago, we have a weekly walk-in meditation here at the center. So I was here. Next door, there is a studio. They they play music there, and so it's fairly, loud. You can hear it. And so for me, the observation, like when just trying to focus on the breath, doing that, thoughts would keep coming, going, that was all going on. Um, and it's good. I mean, or good, or I wouldn't even say good or bad, but that's what it was. And then suddenly start hearing the music. In the meantime, I could also hear other sounds, which again, they're present, they're here. I can hear the fan, I can hear, little things here and there. But again, they were not triggering any other thoughts. It was just like, fine, just started. That's good. But the music, now I'm also a musician. So as soon as the music started, I knew that song. Now suddenly my mind is like, tracking
Yeah.
that, and I know, okay, here's the fill coming up, and so, and I'm aware of, or I'm like, I knew that my mind is going to chase that, and I was trying to hold it back, take it back, and uh, after like a few times, I was like, okay, I don't care whether it goes that way, or once in a while, if I remember, I'll come back to my breath. So just sort of. But again, I'm not even saying like real time how it was going, what I was thinking about, but I just thought it's just an observation experience.
The observation of how much that affects the
Yeah, something like this. And I think in a sense, you know, you want to have a very quiet place, like more of a controlled space. But then the reality is that's the reality.
Yeah.
Things are going to happen, and they're going to trigger things, and they're going to take you out, and you
Yeah.
just have to deal with that. Or
Yeah, wonderful. I appreciate you sharing that. Because it's very practical and real world. And I think, yeah, the sentiment you shared just at the end there, I'm of that opinion. Like, we're all living in the world. Like, I think all of us in this room, have families and jobs and have to fight traffic. So if we want to cloister ourselves into meditation in like a very, how do you say it, private space, but the rest of our life is in private, it's going to be very difficult to bridge the meditation to the life. So I think it's more appropriate to start with things like this. So just some background, and you all can go read about it too. The Mahamudra traditions in India were wonderful traditions of usually like what sometimes we call left-handed paths, meaning kind of fringe, where they were against the norms. So these were often people who were on the fringes, who became very realized practitioners by receiving a sadhana, receiving some instruction in this and some transmission. But then they would eventually blend it with their life. So it was so there's these stories of the 84 Mahasiddhas, who some of them are Buddhists, some of them are Hindu and Buddhist. They're like crossover gurus in different traditions. But more or less what I'm saying is their stories are very interesting. So like one of the Mahasiddhas was a sesame oil maker. So he would do this meditation while crushing sesame seeds and making oil. One was a musician. One was a king. And Mahasiddha means they attained enlightenment. So, but they attained it while in the life, while blending this practice. And I think one of the features is what you just said, which is we stop trying to make the world fit our preference, and we start working with how suffering and happiness are appearing through meditation, where we don't reject what's coming, but we also don't accept. So this is a feature to Mahamudra that's very, I think, useful for us in modern life, because we're a lot more like the lives of these Mahasiddhas than, for instance, a monk, because most of us aren't going to live that life. And so we need to learn to use, it's like we're using the poison to wake up, sort of. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I think very, very quickly on that. Sorry, just one couple of quick seconds on that is that the whole kind of being able to, like, if you want to do something like playing music, or learn a song or whatever, that takes a lot of, or play with the band, even, like, now there are other people and thoughts and minds involved. um there is perseverance, and there is focus, and you're trying to achieve a goal, all of that. Doing all of that without attachment and without like all of those, because you are going to have conflicts, dealing with conflicts, and then suddenly you will see that you are now attached to that goal. Now, should I be not attached to that? If I'm not attached, how am I going to achieve the goal? So that's kind of again, those are the kind of questions that keep coming all the time.
Yeah, wonderful. Keep asking those questions. I would say the more questions you can come up with, the better. And then if you get interested in this kind of teaching, if this sparks you from this weekend, this would then be adding the layer of looking at the mind during all of that. That's the specialty of this, is we learn to become a very inner being. Sounds sometimes bad, but what I mean by it here is like we learn to merge outer and inner, but we have to know our minds on very deep levels, and that's what these practices do, because it's hard, because it's like, I think of awareness practice, because we could also say shamatha vipassana is awareness practice. We're just using awareness in different ways. It's like layers we're peeling. And most of us, we know a very superficial layer of mind, and we need to go deeper. And as we go deeper, but it's tricky. We can't know the next layer, and we can't know the next one until we've peeled the layer. And this happens all experientially. It doesn't happen through thinking. It happens through meditation. So it does take some practice. So the good news is, once we have some facility with awareness, we can blend it with the life. But we do need to have some facility for that. Yeah. So yeah. Good luck with that. I'm rooting for you.
Hello.
Oh yeah, there we go.
So the sounds that or anything that distract you during meditation, what I found helpful in my practice is just having that flexibility, at least through the Tibetan meditation, that if I am, no matter what I'm doing, if I'm doing awareness meditation through breath, and I start hearing sounds, like my son suddenly has this urge to go play piano, sometimes even knowing that I might be meditating at one corner of the house, then I switch to sound meditation. So that's
Nice.
something I was introduced to. So just using whatever's happening around you. So rather than just still continuing to focus on the breath, or if I'm doing analytical meditation, just switching to just hearing what are the sounds that are going on. Like just I felt like made my life easy rather than continuing to stick with whatever my practice goals were for that session. So that's just my
Yeah, that's great. So
experience.
that would be like when we're using an object, shamatha with an object, then we can change the object skillfully like that. Here, it's like we're leaving all the windows and doors open without preference. So then this would be the next layer. But that's wonderful. I think I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes going from just the layer of like working with one's breath to this layer, it's too big of a jump. So we need these kinds of steps of like learning to be flexible with the object, like making, like as you're saying, making sound our object. And then eventually we can make the mind just wide open. But it takes some time. So yeah, wonderful.
Uh, I, in my because I'm fairly new, probably 2-3 years into meditation, analytical is tricky. It's hard. But just having moved from awareness, objects meditation to analytical, I feel like I have the toolkit. So when things like this happen, I can switch back. So there's fluidity in
Yeah.
the practice. So
Yeah,
that
wonderful.
helps. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. To me, this is like one of the most important things we need is fluidity. And then there's kind of absolute fluidity where we've removed preference, but that's coming later in the text. That's hard, and and the truth is, actually, it's just all of these are, when we take away conclusion, we just have this deepening of connecting with our nature. I think Buddha nature doesn't have preference. You know, that's partly why it's at peace. I mean, just think about it for a second in a very simple way. What causes us to be stressed most of the time? We could say many things, but I think we could use the word preference. For me, it's like that. So, what's it like to live without preference? I mean, I think there's a lot of difficult questions with this too. Is like, how do we make choices? I think this is one of the hardest things when we're talking about non duality. We might have the question, oh, without an aim, how do you make a choice? And this is where there's some bridge to what we're talking about. Like a Buddha has this part of this gay part, the song and the gay is also wisdom. So there's like this, the texts say there's this non-conceptual, non-dual wisdom that takes over, that knows and can react, but it's not reacting from any kind of point of reference. It's very interesting. I mean, just even that question that might be possible, it's pretty wild, I think. I mean, for me, it's very inspiring, but it's also a very interesting question because I think our conceptual mind doesn't know how to think of that because it's beyond how the conceptual mind works. Now we're getting into tomorrow, sorry, but you helped me. You prompted that, yeah.
On the first paragraph, it talks about entering equipoise without the slightest distraction. I'm getting caught up on equipoise. Can you explain equipoise?
Yeah, which
It was in the state in that state where you are indistinct from your guru.
oh yeah.
Do not allow your conceptual mind to certain any fears or expectations and enter equipoise without the slightest distraction. Equipoise is, I don't understand what equipoise.
Yeah. Real quick, I just want to point out I didn't make it up. It's saying there. Do not allow your conceptual mind to entertain any fears or expectations. That's another word for preferences, right? Because how do our preferences choose? They either choose fear or expectation, right? If we really analyze it, if we really look. Anyways, just a side note to make sure I'm not becoming a new age guru up here, you know? There was a source. Yeah, so equipoise usually means, I forget the root meaning of this word, but usually when it's applied in meditation, it's like how we sit, how we kind of abide, how the mind or body or meditation is poised, hence equipoise, right? So yeah, usually they say meditative equipoise. Sometimes it can allude to like stillness. So he might be alluding to that here. Yeah, nowness, stillness, awareness, like all of that. Yeah. Whoosh. We better. I was thinking we should probably meditate. No, go ahead. No, I'm. It's fine with me. I'm still remembering Bay's question too, but that'll lead into our practice.
I don't know if this is in line with what you're teaching, but you said something, the preference or expectations was what came
Fear
to
or
my mind.
expectations. Yeah.
I mean, how, as human beings, how is it possible to carry on in our daily lives without expectations?
That was my question. Yeah.
Like whether it's from people or like our work. I find that difficult, but I also find that I suffer most when I do have expectations.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. This is what's honestly, I think that's a great question to keep asking. Like, I'm not going to give an answer. I just want to put more things into our awareness so we can reflect on it more. Yeah, this is like the whole thing that I think is very exciting about the Dharma. For me, I'm like more interested in, I'm like a Dharma cheerleader. That's really like how I view my job. So I want to kind of get you all more passionate about these things. Maybe the way I speak isn't necessarily how you relate to it. So maybe if maybe you have to seek some other sources if I'm not helping with that. But anyways, to me, the passion comes from these kinds of questions of like, okay, I think when we get kind of interested in these kinds of things, it's because there's some part of us saying, is this it? You know what I mean? I mean, sure, some of us come to meditation because we just want to like relax. But I think even that, we're kind of asking a question. Is this it? Like, is the way, is the purpose of life or life this? You know what I mean? And we could talk about that superficially, but I think on a very inner level, it's like our Buddha nature is seeking itself. And so it's asking these questions. Our mind is like always wondering how reality is, how things are, you know? I mean, and some people wonder those things on a very simple level, and some of us wonder those on a deeper level. But eventually it leads us to these kinds of questions. And then we have like, how do you say it? And we're pretty lucky because you know, a man existed. You know, I mean, many women and men have existed like the Buddha, but none that spawned, you know, a tradition that's been able to last this long. So we're kind of lucky to meet this because it's like, that's what I mean by passion and aspiration around this. Because if we really look at the essence of these teachings and what I'm trying to describe these 2 days, we'll see, oh, wow, this guy is talking about something different. We have to be kind of, we have to have enough, we would say merit traditionally, but let's just say kind of intelligence. I don't like that word, but we kind of have to have enough intelligence to recognize it. And I'm not putting anyone down who doesn't recognize that, but we have to have enough intelligence to see, oh, that's unique, like that's different. You know, because when the mind is looking like, is this it? And then we see this, we say, well, that's not like the same language that my mind speaks. You see what I'm saying? My mind speaks the language of expectation and fear. But this guy is talking about something that helps us to go beyond that. And that, I think, is where the passion can build. So I don't know. I think it's better to kind of stoke that fire because it's like for ourselves, I mean, to stoke that fire of, well, what is it, you know? Because obviously we can get involved in something like this in the Buddhist traditions, the Buddhisms, and make it the same as the rest of our life. That's pretty easy to do, you know, because that's what our dualistic mind does. You know, it takes something and brings it and incorporates it into the egohood. But what this is saying, this is teaching us how to get out of that dynamic. But we have to, the conceptual mind can't get us out of that dynamic. So these kinds of practices are there to help us train or use the conceptual mind and then use, how do you say it? These aspects of less conceptual mind, of awareness, clarity, etc. And then eventually we can peel layers down until we can experience our raw, kind of uncut Buddha nature. And tasting that is not something that can be described in words. So it just has to come through meditation. So it's like, that's why I mean, stoking the fire or getting the thirst is more important sometimes because it leads us to practice more. And then we get more passionate, more passionate. Not like a cult member. It's like something else. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like, to me, because we were talking about devotion earlier, this is what brings devotion to me. Like when we take refuge in the Dharma, this is kind of what it means to me. Essentially, there's many ways to take refuge, but this is one of the ways. For me, this is one of the ways that brings the most juice and like inspiration. But also, I kind of understand things like Kali, like Tara, like Chenrezig, Amitabha. I kind of understand these things. How should I put it? I don't want to say that I don't understand them, but I feel closer to them. That's what I'm trying to say because of my growing passion for this. I don't know how to put it because when we start to use symbols, when we start to use things that come out of language, we start to see other ways and doorways and keys to getting closer to going beyond fear and expectation. Because, like I said, it's not the conceptual mind that can do that. The conceptual mind, all it does is produces fear and and expectation. That's sort of its job. That's how it functions. Or let's call it the dualistic mind, to be more specific. So I don't know. There's something in like the traditions that use symbols. So in Tantra and Buddhist Tantra, we use symbols like deities, like pictures you see around here. And it's easy to misunderstand because it's like, well, that just looks like a painting or some kind of cultural thing. But no, it's a doorway into less conceptual ways of relating to these kinds of teachings. It's like a doorway. And it's not just a doorway that, how do you say it? It's like there is a field that exists that we can tune into as well. This is part of the kind of woo-woo Buddhism a little bit, so I don't want to scare you too much. But it like there's other kinds of physics that exist in the universe that we can't measure. There's other kinds of things that exist that we can't see. And part of that is what we call the Sambhogakaya realms, which are these fields of enlightened beings that function not in physical form, but in other kinds of form. And so when we're working with these other practices, we can tune into that, and they really help us to go deeper into these kinds of teachings in another way. But we also have Nagarjuna, you know, Chandrakirti, like I mentioned before, who are Lama Tsongkhapa, who are so refined with their words that they help us to also get very close with words. But there, at some point, we have to take a leap beyond the words. And that's why I like Mahamudra, because it gives us some tools to start to work with that. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's like it's like a buffet. It's like a, you know, you can go to dessert if you want, but in order to, if you don't understand how to eat yet, like dessert doesn't make much sense until you start with the appetizer. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, we can go right to Mahamudra, which is kind of more the dessert. Well, it's not, but let's just put it that way. More the advanced practices. But we also can have to understand it in context. So that's where just, it's all, in one way, I love Tibetan Buddhism for that, because it's just challenging for us because we don't have a lot of time. But but once you get a rounder picture of everything and kind of, I don't want to say complete, but let's say like from top to bottom, the whole thing starts to click and make sense. Where often what happens to us as modern practitioners, we're getting hodgepodge because we don't have a lot of time. So we're just like, oh, that sounds cool. I'll show up for that empowerment. Let's go there. Or this teaching sounds cool. But I think what getting some kind of approach that goes from A to Z is also helpful at some point, because then we have some kind of picture. Anyways. Okay. What time is it? Oh no. So so posture. So I think most of you know like meditation posture. Generally we have what's called a 7-point posture. Like that's the really like classical way to hold the body, but most of us can't do that, you know, because unless we have like very flexible hips and these kinds of things. So that would be like full lotus. The 7 points are the legs are in the full lotus. The hands in meditative equipoise here, right on top of the left. The shoulders are spread. The back is, upright. The chin is slightly tucked. The tongue is on the top of the palate. This helps with concentration as well as, like, apparently, I don't know, probably if any of us have this problem, but apparently people who can stay in meditation for 8 hours, they might start to drool. So then the tongue sort of prevents that. And then the gaze, right? And that's what kind of Bay's question was. So basically, that's the 7-point posture. Now, most of us have to modify that to some degree. If we're sitting in a chair, we just try to produce as much as that as we can. Most importantly, having the back, upright, right? And not hunched over. And we can experiment. I think it's fun to experiment a little bit, because I think sometimes we can get really dogmatic with technique, which isn't so bad in the beginning because it gives us like something to hold on to when we don't know what to do. So we hold on to something and we just work with it and we grow. But at a certain point, we can try meditation slumped over and see what happens, because you learn about your mind. You learn about the energy systems. So I think that's kind of That's what helped me. But sometimes we also can grow meditation where we can do it laying down or we can do it moving. It just depends on us. But we have to be clear what we're doing. Again, back to view. So this part of meditation about the gaze, this is like very dependent on the style of meditation sometimes, meaning like what we're trying to produce in the practice. So like I said, some traditions in Buddhism close the eyes. In the Tibetan lineages, you'll see people close their eyes, but generally mostly people practice with the eyes half open or fully open. You see fully open a little bit more in the Mahamudra and Dzogchen traditions, and there's a reason for it, because the eyes have a way they work with the energies in the body when we're doing those kinds of practices. But the Dalai Lama, I remember even seeing a video of him meditating, and his eyes were pretty much fully open. And in some of his writings, even for visualization, he recommends keeping the eyes open. And so there's all kinds of reasoning for this, but what I recommend is half open or fully open. The gaze also helps us to work with our energy when it's too excited, or like basically excitement means there's a lot of discursive thinking, right? We can't settle in the practice. We can't find stillness. And so in that way, we can lower the gaze. We can use the gaze that way. When we lower the gaze, kind of brings the energy down. When we raise the gaze, that also helps when we're really sleepy. It's opposite when we're experiencing dullness in practice. So sometimes we work with the gaze that way. But what I find the most helpful is this aspect of kind of spaciousness in the practice, which this type of shamatha is emphasizing, a relaxed awareness. And in order to facilitate that, it's helpful to come into spaciousness. And this is where, how do you say it? Focused vision, like when our vision is more straight ahead, also our mind becomes more narrow, more straight ahead, more subject-object related. But when we widen the gaze, basically when the eyes are open and we allow the peripheral vision to be part of our meditation, it also widens the mind. I don't know why. I'm sure like somebody with more study on this could tell you. But basically, just try it. It works, right? So what this means is we don't block the vision. You know, if you want to keep them half open, it's fine. Or if you want to gaze downwards a little bit, it's fine. But you also include the peripheral vision. So this is what I recommend for this kind of meditation, because it changes how the mind then relates to sense perception, essentially, is what we're talking about. So for those of you not used to this, it takes some time. It's not an easy transition for some people. For some right away, they kind of, it helps. But for a lot of people, they struggle more with thinking when the eyes are open. But what I recommend is just persevere in it. You can do a combination of like closing your eyes for a few minutes, then open them for a few minutes, then close them again. And then slowly you transition to fully open or half open. Half open is also a good transition. But really, I'm kind of an evangelist of open-eyed meditation because it really transformed my practice. But it took a few months to transition, right? We're going to struggle with blinking or the eyes being dry. But once eventually you figure out how to relax the eyes, and then it's no problem. Yeah.
Do we focus on anything, or are we just letting things on? So are we just kind of noticing things?
With the
without
eyes?
focusing on anything like breath or point in the distance or anything like that?
With the eyes, or you mean with
With
the
the eyes open.
with the eyes? Yeah, basically with this style, and again, this is one style I just want to keep pointing out. It's not the only one, right? We would call this like objectless meditation or shamatha without support or Mahamudra shamatha. It's different names for it. Yeah, you're not focusing on anything. It's more like the sense, it's like, it's very natural what we're doing. Like in one way, another way to describe this kind of shamatha, we're allowing meditation to become very natural, because eventually that helps to connect with what's the most natural, which is Buddha nature. So you leave the eyes natural, which, you know, this is kind of a question you're going to have to explore too. Like, is it more just because it's a habit of maybe looking forward and focusing on something, does that mean it's natural to you? You know? So you'll have to experiment and you kind of find what's more natural. And I guess like another way to think of that is, I don't know, like this feels really natural to me here, just to how this chair is. And I don't know, I just feel like my body is just kind of here and natural.
So find your comfort level and place.
It's sort of like there's prescriptions like the 7-point posture, which for someone who's never meditated is not natural. But it's like, I have this question. Is it not natural because it's not natural, or because it's not natural because we're just used to a bad habit? You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
There's this question. So it's like that with all the senses, like with the ears, with our sense of sight, our sense of smell, taste, etc. Mahamudra is kind of all about, almost to like, it's sort of become cliche in Mahamudra. Leave it as it is, leave it natural. We just try our best to leave things as they are. And one way to think of the senses is sort of kind of what this gentleman was saying. It's like, if we just leave sound to be sound, what's the problem? Sound can exist. There's no problem with sound. We don't have to get overly preoccupied with it or cut it off. So we just leave things how they are. And so the eyes, it's similar. And I think when the gaze is left open, at least open, let's just put it that way, it's more natural than closing the eyes, because we're not blocking that gateway. It's another way to think of these. The five sense perception, the five sense consciousnesses, as well as mind, the sixth consciousness, they're like gateways. And so we're using them as gateways to allow them to rest, to both practice just being with them as they are, but also eventually when we move to Vipassana, it's much easier to transition into using all of our experience for insight. So it's kind of like that. That's another kind of reasoning here. If we close our eyes, then we're going to need to close our eyes every time we meditate. But if we learn to open them and we train in awareness, we could be doing it anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very helpful. But yeah, to answer you specifically, try to open the gaze. You're not staring at anything in particular, but just the gaze is open and resting, kind of like that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's do some practice. So what I'm going to guide here too is a way I often guide for students I work with, some other helpful tools of how to get into this open awareness, or many names: open awareness, objectless shamatha, shamatha without support, Mahamudra shamatha. We're all talking about the same thing. I'm just giving different names. So one way I found really helpful for myself and a lot of other modern people I work with, modern meditators, is using the body as a gateway. And so we're going to start with that. We're going to open into the body, and then we're going to allow that to extend into open awareness. So let's see if this helps you in a different way than maybe the earlier meditation. So just remember the 7-point posture, meaning if you can't do the full one, obviously we're all in chairs, most of us. We just remember the main features. The back is upright, yet relaxed. Our hands are settled in our lap, or if we want to hold meditative mudra with the hands, that's fine. Now take a moment to play with your gaze. So hopefully I converted all of you to open-eyed meditators, at least for this session. And if you're struggling with it, like I said, alternate between open and closed. But in general, just work for a moment with the gaze. So you're allowing the rest of the body to settle, so you can just let it be. Sounds can be sounds, smells can be smells, tastes can be tastes, sensations can be sensations. And now just let the gaze become wide. You're not staring at anything in particular. And one tip here is between you and the next object in front of you, just allow the gaze to rest in the space, but don't let the vision blur or become obscured. As I said, this can take time, but just giving you some tips for working with it right now. And we just let ourselves rest in this space for a moment. And then we're going to start to open up some space in the body. Let's see if you can do this with the eyes open. If you can't, you can close them for this portion of the practice if you want, and then I'll remind you to try to open them again. So we're going to navigate to our feet. This practice might sound a little bit like a kind of body scan, but it's actually not. It's doing something a little bit different. So I want you to try to bring your awareness to the feet, especially the point of the feet that are touching the ground. So there's a point where we can just feel our feet on the ground, or if you're sitting cross-legged on the floor, feel all the parts of your body that are connected to the ground. Sides of your legs, calves, etc. Now feel both feet at the same time. Allow yourself to become aware of that. So there's also a part of the mind that knows that's happening, and you're aware it's happening. And again, as anything, just try your best here. There's no right necessarily. There's just putting the effort. Now find the space within the feet and around and in between the feet. What this means is just allow your awareness to start to sense inside the feet. Now, you might not have much feeling there, but you could still bring your awareness there. Where the bone sits, around to the sides, and also in between both feet. So there's that space in between the feet. That's not physical, but we can sense it. We can sense it because we can sense both feet. Just see if you can be that space. So there's the feeling in the feet connected to the ground, and there's also the space inside the feet, around them, in between. The same as we come up through the calves into the knees, just inhabiting both knees at the same time, just being that space. Inside, around, between. Simultaneous to this, you might also start to sense a really deep grounding in the body. That's why this can be a really nice preliminary. This is an actual Mahamudra Shamatha, but it's like a preliminary we're doing. Moving now into the legs, up into the hips in our seat. As we start to enter the main trunk of the body, just find the abdomen, the sides of the abdomen, the back, the front, and all the way in the middle where the spine sits. And again, you're connecting sensation to the more spacious parts of the body. Or of course, there's physical matter, but when we move there, we sense it as less of a center or edge. So allow yourself to abide in the abdomen as edgeless and centerless. And the same as you move into the midsection, the mid body. If you need to reference the front, back, and sides, that's also fine. Sometimes we find the middle by referencing the sides, the front, the back. Same as we move into the chest. Right in the center of the chest, the heart space, not the physical heart, the energetic heart, right in the center. Again, referencing it from the sides, the front, the back if you need. Or just sitting right there in the center. I just want to name here too. We may also be experiencing other kinds of phenomena like energy movement, sometimes stagnant energy, sometimes emotions. All of that is welcome. There's other practices at another time. I can recommend to work with those kinds of things. But for now, just see if you can allow them. And if they're overwhelming, just move on if they're too painful. Especially with stagnant energy, it can be painful sometimes. From the chest, we're going to move into both shoulders at the same time. The back of the shoulders, the front, the sides, the tops, all the way to the middle, the space in between. Then down the arms, both arms at the same time, until we find our fingertips. If you've had trouble connecting with spaciousness in the body so far, bring your awareness into your fingertips. See if you can connect with spaciousness there. For some people, it's a little easier here. There's a lot of neurons here, apparently. And again, this could be a felt sense even. Inhabiting all fingers at the same time. Just letting our attention and awareness rest there with the feeling. Essentially now we're letting be with feeling. Moving back up the arms into the shoulders, coming into our throat and neck. And again, maybe you want to reference yourself in the front, back, or sides first. Then from there, find the middle. We find this with a sense of awareness and feeling. The awareness and feeling come together. So if you notice yourself thinking about it, try to drop the thinking of where the center of the throat is, and just try to feel it instead. Again, just try your best. That's it. The same through the jaw as we come into the head, connecting with the muscles of the face, moving up through the cheeks, through the eyes. And as we land in the forehead, just finding a middle point just above your eyebrows. We're going to use this point to look back into our head. So imagine yourself looking back into the middle of your head where your brain sits. And then feel and be aware of that area right in the middle of your head where the brain sits. Just allowing yourself to let be and abide there for a few moments. Already, of course, we need some effort, but it's less about concentrating on these areas. It's more just about allowing ourselves to rest into these areas. So I want you to really connect with that flavor, because that'll benefit us and help in the open awareness or shamatha without support as well. So from the head, now we're going to scope back down all the way through the body. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the previous part with us. So as you scope down from the head into the throat, now you're experiencing both the head and throat together. As you scope down like dripping honey from the throat, now you're experiencing the head, throat, shoulders, arms, hands. And similarly down into the chest. Our center, our abdomen, hips, seat, legs, down through our knees, into our calves, and eventually we're back in our feet in this connection to the ground below us in a full body awareness, which means sensing yourself inside of yourself. So there's a feeling of the body, there's a sense of space, there's a felt sense from head to toe. Just let yourself rest there for a few moments. Again, it's a very light object. We're not concentrating on it so heavily. Or in this panoramic way that I've been introducing. So when you're practicing on your own, you can stay here for a little while. This would be more or less a shamatha practice with an object, the object being the whole body. But the next step is to be able to open up into a more spacious awareness and then this quality of clarity. So from here, we're going to take one step to connect with the spaciousness in the room around us by inviting the room to meet us. So that language is deliberate because we're not coming outside of our body to meet the room. See what happens when you invite the room to meet you, while staying in the felt sense of the body. Now with this, we're going to open our eyes if we haven't already. And really open them fully. Just take a moment to connect with a gaze that's more wide, that includes the peripheral vision. Just allow the eyes to relax, but you're connecting with the space in front and around you. And you're also connecting with the space in the body. And you're also allowing the room to meet you. So there's these three spaces: body, eyes, room. And there's not as much distinction between them. They're kind of more pervasive. And now, just notice mind. Mind in its aspect where it can be settled or slightly settled. There's an element that knows. There's an element that is just available. is clear in the sense of it's not colored by anything else. It's just a light, like I said. It's awake in the sense of being open. And we very gently become aware of that. So we just turn this quality of mind that can be watchful. It's watchful of that, as well as, we're not holding all of our sense perceptions. We're just allowing them to be as they are. And we can notice them, but we're more just resting without an object. There's no specific object we're focusing on right now. We're just allowing mind to be in this moment, and we're aware of that. And we just maintain that gently. And when we lose connection to that, you remember that again. So mindfulness, another way to think of it is remembrance. You remember that clear, undistracted nowness. You become aware of that, and you're back in the practice. So there's no specific object. There's just awareness, clarity, and nowness. And just allow that to happen. You may need a little bit of effort, but if we over effort, sometimes everything gets tight and that groundedness and openness is lost. That's why he says in the text to relax. And when distraction takes over, we recognize that and we gently cut that off through recognition. And then we're back in awareness. One feature here is maybe it's a helpful tip. Notice if you're pushing anything and see if you can not push. So we find this meditation by not pushing. That's the relaxing part or the resting part. But we're also not losing awareness and a little bit of a vivid quality to mind. Even if we're sleepy, there's still some sense of vividness. So there's vividness, awareness, nowness, but also ease and naturalness in the practice. So that's how that's how we tighten and loosen here. Loosen means we may need to rest or allow ourselves to kind of sit down within the practice. And tighten means we just kind of gently turn up the vividness, or we connect to that vivid quality of mind. There's a gentle maintenance of that. We preserve that moment to moment, gently. Okay. Did you get it? So now maybe some of this starts to make more sense, right? Let's read it again. Take this sky as your example. I think they were outdoors, right? So I think, hopefully you caught that already. Take this sky as your example and train in the meditation state without center or edge. Take the sun and moon as your example and train in the meditation state without increase or decrease. Take this mountain as your example and train in the meditation state without shifting or change. Take the great ocean as your example and train in the meditation state without surface or base. Take your own mind as the meaning and train in the meditation state without worry or doubt. Okay. So tomorrow we'll find out what happened with Alderboom's meditation. Did she get it or not? So I wanted to make sure we had a little bit of time to just check in before we close today. Anything on your minds? How was that for you? Was that helpful to have the body as the way in? Yeah. And there's a lot of other realms of that. Like I said, it's kind of an area. Sonen Rinpoche, who's one of my main teachers, he's really the one who, I mean, now there's a lot of things on somatics and kind of embodiment. There's a lot of different explorations of that in modern meditation. But Sonen Rinpoche has some really beautiful practices for also working with challenging emotions. So for me, that's where it started with one of his practices called handshake practice, which, I can introduce you to, but maybe another time. Or you can go check out his things. So it started like that for me, and then it became this journey of understanding or recognizing I had very, very little relationship to my feeling world. Right? I'm more of an analytical person, and I think when we're more, how do you say it? When we move towards modern education systems and sort of how the modern world works in general, we end up becoming heavier on that side, on the thinking analytical side, and we sort of lose touch with the feeling side. And so sometimes we can recover that through some of these more somatic or embodied awareness practices. So I spend a large part of my work focuses on that. So I'm happy to share more of that with you. A lot's on my website, but you're welcome to check out on there. But I'm mentioning it here because it can sometimes remedy obstacles where we think we can't meditate in certain ways, or we're having challenges when actually it's really a problem with the body not being able to settle. So of course, in other forms of Buddhism, like Theravada Buddhism and stuff, they sometimes spend some more time with body-based practices. But I also think there's some modern approaches that can help that aren't necessarily lineage-based. They're just sort of techniques or preliminaries for us to help with then going into the more traditional practices. Tibetan Buddhism spends a lot of time with the body, but in the Vajrayana world. So it's almost like the most advanced practices are the ones that work with the body, but they're not for this level of working with the body. So you see what I'm saying? So this level of working, just grounding the body, generally most Tibetans didn't struggle with that because, they didn't have Instagram. It was totally different time. I think most human beings didn't struggle with this until probably the Industrial Revolution and post, right? It was a modern person's problem. And I don't think it's necessarily a certain culture or ethnicity that struggles with this now. I think it's all of us who enter that modern system. But when you do go to like a rural village in the Himalayas, or I don't know, sometimes I end up in the mountains in Latin America somewhere, you find people who don't have these kinds of problems. You find people who are more embodied. Why? Because, maybe they didn't have the opportunity to obsess over the analytical mind so much. So it's not like it's like this trade-off, but I think when we're modern meditators, we kind of have this choice where we can develop both. Because like having a really clear, sharp, analytical, intellectual mind is helpful, especially for studying the Dharma. It's very helpful. But when that's overwhelming us and imbalancing our energy systems, it can affect the meditation in a negative way. So that's what I mean by the best of both worlds. If we balance the body and we have the intellect to study the Dharma, wow, a lot can go right after that. But sometimes we don't recognize it because nobody's pointing it out. Because now it's kind of a relative truth. You know what I mean? It's like everybody's nervous system, well, not everybody, many people's nervous system is overactivated. And it's like the soup we're swimming in, this, you know? So we don't notice because, and everyone's struggling with anxiety and depression and everything, but we're pointing at the wrong enemy. It's actually something fixable within our body. And also in ancient cultures, they also had, I think, medical systems that were also more aimed at working with these kinds of things. Herbal medicines. They understood things like prana. It's basically a prana imbalance. So we have to balance it. And we can balance it with meditation. We can balance it with herbs and acupuncture and things like that. Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, like Hatha yoga, but also like drugs. But I don't recommend drugs. But, you know, some people try to balance it with that. It works for a little bit and then you get other problems. I mean, yeah, I won't go there. Okay. So, yeah, anything on your minds before we close? Just on the practice, anything I'd like to, you know, was that a little bit easier to enter open awareness from that perspective of the body first? Oh, okay. 19 years? Oh, so how it was good? Helpful? Different?
Just to repeat myself, yeah, my first open-eyed meditation. It was good to be guided. I found the focus was interesting to see it come in and out of focus objects between me and my eyes. So very interesting, and yeah, I found it helpful to be guided for sure.
Cool. Yeah, so I highly recommend it. It's something very, very useful. Yeah, I don't really meditate with my eyes closed that much anymore. Sometimes when I do somatic things or visualization sometimes, but really once you get used to it, you never go back because there's no need. Yeah. Awesome. Anyone else? Anything practice wise? Or online? All right. So tomorrow we'll continue. We'll continue to explore shamatha. Mostly what we were working with today was stillness, connecting with stillness. A little bit talking about movement, but tomorrow we'll work more with movement, and then we'll go into some vipassana. The rest of this text is on vipassana, and then we'll see Milarepa's advice for vipassana meditation, just a taste of that. So it would be good if you can reflect on today a little bit as much as you can, like even if it's just one thing you took away, one or two things, and you know we can discuss tomorrow and deepen it, because I'm spending quite a bit of time on just how do you say it, the learning phase of Dharma today. So I'm curious what comes out of that for you, if anything. And thank you. Thanks for your perseverance. It's not easy to sit all day and hear a guy babble. So yeah, you're welcome. Maybe we'll do a quick dedication. Do you have the Gewadi? Let's see. Okay. Oh, here we go. Page 31. So just like we kind of started the day with motivation and intention and like where we're turning the mind, now hopefully you have some more kind of understanding why we do that, because that's part of view. Now we like seal all of the energy we put in through what we call dedicating the merit. Merit just basically means all of the energy towards awakening, aspirations, practice, listening to the Dharma, reflecting on it, etc. And we seal that energy through what we call dedicating it. And so you'll see what the words, through the words, we're aiming it at a purpose, mainly waking up, right, for the benefit of others. So that's what the dedication is really about. It's making sure, it's like a reminder that we don't waste all of this precious energy, your precious energy and time, on something frivolous. You see what I mean? So it's kind of like a reminder here. The Dharma is very skillful in that way. It's like there's just many ways to remember the Dharma, or in another way, remember what's meaningful. You want me to? Oh, you don't have it?
Lama sangye drupyone drowa chikyang malupa deyi sala kurpachu. Due to this virtue, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state.
Just go to the bottom of that page. Jump all vowel.
Okay. To English. I fully dedicate all these virtues to be able to train just like the hero Manjushri, who knows reality, and just like Samantabhadra as well. I fully dedicate all my roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by all the gone beyond victorious ones of the three times in order to have good conduct.
And then I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thanks everyone. See you tomorrow. Have a good evening.